righty. Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening and good morning to those joining from Europe and South and North America. This is Greg Nance, Wujiao Ma Chinli Chinima. I am the founder, CEO of Dyad. I'm a University of Chicago alumni. Very, very excited to welcome each and every one of you to our exclusive Mastermind talk. We are in for a treat. Today is going to be absolutely amazing. Our mission here at Dyad is to provide mentorship for the motivated. We want to help folks take the big next steps in their life, and we love to inform and inspire. That's really our aim, and that's our aim today. We want to inform and inspire with incredible insights and incredible inspiration that helps you take the next big steps on your journey. We do that through coffee talks, through seminars, through auditorium lectures. We do it through public speaking camps and skill building sessions. We do it through trips and engaging opportunities abroad, like our exclusive opportunity with Yellowstone National Park to learn and do research in the wild. We also do it through our Mastermind series. And today's event is the latest and greatest in our Mastermind series event. We have a very, very special guest speaker. Our VIP featured speaker is calling from Los Angeles, California, USA. Mr. Evan Cudworth is an exceptionally gifted and exceptionally experienced thought leader and former admissions officer from the University of Chicago, who was previously the former senior assistant admissions director, who has reviewed more than 10,000 applications and conducted literally hundreds of interviews. He has tons of experience at each level within the admissions process and is a master strategist who's literally seen it all. His passion is helping people understand that process, taking them inside the admissions office so they can better understand what it takes to best shape their personal development, shape their background, and prepare themselves for successful application. Each of us are in for a treat today because of Mr. Evan Cudworth. I'm honored to introduce our friend and Dyad's senior advisor, Mr. Evan Cudworth. Evan.
Hello, thank you so much, Greg, for that kind introduction. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
You might be muted, sir.
Oh, am I still muted?
No sound yet.
Yeah. All right, there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Welcome, everyone. Sorry about that little hiccup here, but we're very fond of all kinds of technical mishaps here in Los Angeles. Great. Oh, that works better too. So yeah, so there's no feedback. Excellent. Well, good. Well, I'm actually going to jump in here and share my screen with everyone here and start a little presentation that I have for you today. It should take about 20 minutes. And along the way, if you do have any questions, just type them into the box and I will try to check in regularly on that box and see if I can answer any of the questions, if I'm going too fast or if you need clarification for that. But keep in mind, at the very end of this process, we will have a question and answer session. So we'll be able to stop and answer all of your questions at the end as well. Sound good? All right. So here we go. My name is Evan Cudworth and I'm about to take you inside the admissions process. Ready? So first of all, thank you, Greg, for that very kind introduction. But a little bit of, oh wait, just let me be sure. The Zoom meeting is still working. Okay, so I can't answer questions when I'm actually in here. 1 second. Okay, good. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go back in. I will not be able to answer questions from the Zoom while I'm sharing my screen at the same time. So we'll have to wait till the end, but just wanted to confirm that. All right. Excellent. Here we are. So who am I? Again, Evan Cudworth. I did graduate from the University of Chicago in 2009. During my time traveling with the University of Chicago, I worked with many different types of universities like Brown, Columbia, Cornell, University of Michigan, Harvard, Yale. I traveled with all of my colleagues at those schools and shared lots of information with them. Admissions officers tend to work very closely and share a lot in common with our other fellow admissions officers. A lot of times, reading those applications, I'd be sitting by a computer right now, like I am right now in Los Angeles. It's actually 11 p.m. at night, or 2300, so fairly late in the evening. But this would often be exactly the same time that we'd be sitting down as admissions officers to go through and read applications. I now operate my own consulting firm as well, helping students just like you and students all across the globe get ready and for admissions to both undergraduate and graduate schools. So here's the plan for today. We're going to cover three main topics. The first topic is how is an application reviewed and evaluated? I'll take you inside the mind of an admissions officer and sort of show you behind the scenes what we look for. Second, answer some of, I think you might have some pressing questions on what is the relative importance of the personal statement versus your CV or your resume, your recommendation letters, and then most importantly, your test scores. How do we sort of rank all of those, and how important are they for each type of school that you'd be applying for? And then number three, we'll close with three common misconceptions about the admissions process. Oftentimes, I run into students that there's a lot of myths and legends and things that are out there that are not necessarily true about admissions. So hopefully I can clear some of those up for you today. And then again, we will end with some question and answer. Sound good? All right, let's jump ahead. So first and foremost, how is an application reviewed and evaluated? So here's a little chart that covers sort of all of these things together. You'll see this is sort of the whole process from beginning to end of what it's like to apply to an American university. There's some acronyms and things in here, so please don't if you don't know what those mean, that's totally fine. Just concentrate mostly on what these those bigger sort of letters look like on the side. First and foremost, sending your documents, getting everything in together and getting everything collected. You put that all in, and then what happens on our end is the universities will collect all of that information, and then it will go out to faculty members or admissions officers who sort of sit in a committee-like structure, which essentially means that there might be 1, 2, 3, 5 different, 10 different people that are going to be reading your application. It really depends on the type of program that you're applying to. If it's a smaller school, it might just be 1 or 2 people. If it's a really big program that is highly competitive, you might have 2 admissions officers and a faculty member all weighing in and saying, yes, I like this part of a student, or no, this isn't somebody that we're looking for on a given year. So after they sort of all vote, and it's a little bit like if you've ever seen, like China's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent or USA's Got Talent, where they have the X's and the O's, where they sort of all vote. It's a little bit like that, what happens sort of behind the scenes. So that review committee, that next area, they will get together and help evaluate that profile. They will then give a decision that is either admit, so that's yay, you are admitted, conditional admit, which essentially means we would like to admit you, but we might need more information, or we want you to retake a test. Your GPA was strong, but we need you to get a little bit higher test, and if you meet that next test, then we will admit you. They'll give you a waiting list is a possibility, and that is essentially, hey, we don't have room for you right now on our campus, but we're going to wait and see, and maybe a spot will open up if some people don't say yes to us. And then there's also the possibility of a rejection, where they will say, nope, sorry, we're not accepting you at this time. So those are the four main decisions that you might get from one of these universities. Finally, the review committee will ask for an answer from you. So you will be able to either say, yes, I would like to come to your school, or no, I'm going to another type of school. And if you build a great list of different types of schools, hopefully you will end up getting a number of those types of decisions. The great types of, most students will apply between 3 to 10 schools. So you might be getting different decisions from many of those different places, and eventually you will have to decide on one place where you want to attend. And then the final step in that process, of course, is sending your financial documents and perhaps sending your I-20 and going for visa interviews as well. So a little bit in depth on what are those application materials? What do you actually need to send? Again, every program that you apply to is going to be a little different, but these are the standard ones that you will see at most places. Your transcript or your GPA. This is probably the most important. What classes have you taken? How well did you do in those classes? And how prepared are you going to be to succeed at whatever program you're applying to? Professor evaluations, usually there's 2 of these that are required. Of course, test scores. If you're an undergraduate student, that'll be your SAT or your ACT. If you're applying to a graduate program, that's your LSAT, which is for law school, GMAT, which is for business school, and GRE, which covers sort of a much wider range of different types of schools that you would be applying for. And then, of course, some sort of English proficiency test, the TOEFL, PTE, one of those as well. Most programs will also require some personal statement or statement of purpose. This is my specialty. This is what I love to talk about, which is essentially the essay, right? This is where you get a chance to write about yourself, tell your story. And this is admissions officers' favorite part as well. We like to get to know students and to hear more background, the things that don't normally show up in just a number in your GPA or your test scores. Your extracurricular activities or your resume, things will show up there, and that will, we'll talk more about that later. And then 2 optional things are something like an interview, where you will actually be asked to talk with an admissions officer and go back and forth. Or finally, supplemental materials, extra research that you've done. Maybe you're a musician, sending a musical recording, et cetera, et cetera. When you put all of this together, it can tell a pretty good story about what kind of student you have been and what kind of student you will be. And wanted to talk a little bit about, so I was talking earlier, Burr, about sort of what this admissions committee looks like. What actually does this committee look like? This is sort of what it will be, is many different types of people who are all sitting there. They won't judge as harshly as some people do on some of these reality TV shows, but there are similar conversations that happen where people go back and forth. Hold on one second. I'm getting a chat here. I just want to be sure that I've got everything. Oh, great. Oh, yes, American Idol. Okay, I can see my chats in here. Yes, so we have a little bit of American Idol here. So I think the question that you are all asking right now is, how do you impress these admissions committees? What do you do to get their attention? And that's what we're going to talk about next here. So one important thing to know is that you are, oops, I can't see my, I can't find my, one second. All right, I'm going to reshare this. There we go. Sorry, I am not able to see my. thing here. Okay. Is it still working? Okay, there we go. Now I can read my full everything. Okay, so the thing here to know is that you are more than just your GPA. All right. Sometimes programs will literally have a minimum GPA where they'll say you have to have gotten, a 3.5 or a 3.7. But in addition to that, they want to be sure that you're a good fit for a specific program. And they're going to look for other things like, are you a good collaborator? Do you believe in teamwork and leadership? Do you communicate well with professors? Do you have any special skills? Do you know how to code? Do you do photography? Maybe you're an athlete as well. And then also, do you have a happy and fun personality? I know that this might not seem super important, but a big part of admissions officers' jobs is they want to admit students that are going to come to campus and not only be great researchers and contribute academically, but be good roommates and be strong, again, teamwork and collaborators and help make the campus a fun and exciting place to be. So again, all of these things are factors. None is the most important or least important, but they're all going to work together to form a story of who you are. One of the big questions I get all the time is, how do I set myself apart? How do I impress them? How do I be not boring? And being different matters. The good news is you all are already different, even if you don't know that you are. But in your CV and personal statement, finding those little ways that you've followed a really strong path, but there is a unique way that you've achieved that path. So here's a couple examples. How about an engineer who also studies science journalism, who writes and learns how to talk about their research in a way that everyone can understand? That might be interesting. An MBA candidate, that's a business school candidate, who also writes financial poetry, right? So an artist who's also a businessman. And how about a doctor who's captain of the soccer team, or a violinist who studies physics and can discuss the math behind their music, right? All of these ways are ways to sort of connect different aspects of who you are and your personality into what you want to study and what you're going to contribute once you get to campus. The big thing that everyone has to remember, though, is being specific, okay? If you see this little pizza dancing man down here at the bottom who's saying, "I'm awesome and I know it," you're all awesome, all right, already. You probably know you're awesome. I know you're awesome, but you have to prove it, right? Just saying, "I'm awesome and I know it," is not going to do it on its own. So an example of saying of being specific is, a bad example is, your program is highly ranked. Great, we already know that, all right? Admissions officers know how highly ranked our program is. Instead, say something specific about it. Say, your program fits my style of learning with small classes and one-on-one mentorship. Much better. Here's another longer example of how to be specific. And I think this is one of the most important slides in this whole presentation, okay? When you're writing your statement of purpose or writing why you want to be at a school, the biggest mistake that I see students make is they write the first version here, which is, let me read it out loud to you. "I have a very strong passion for business. Makes the world a better place. I want to make the world a better place. Your school has a strong business program. Therefore, I'm a perfect fit." There's nothing in that statement that is untrue. I'm not learning anything in that statement. So how about this second statement here, which says almost the same thing, but does so with much more details, and I learn much more about the student, right? "I always remember being in awe of the CEOs on TV. When I was little, my friends always wanted to play house, but I wanted to play corporation. 20 years later, I'm still chasing my dream of being a CEO, and your MBA program's emphasis on entrepreneurship will help me achieve that goal." See how much more exciting that is? And all the person had to do was write a couple more details about who they are. All right. So that in general, we just closed out, what goes into an application and how are applications reviewed. Now let's talk a little bit more about what is the importance of the personal statement versus the recommendations versus the test scores, all of those types of things. And the way that I want to do that is, so here's actually a screenshot from from a more like China's Got Talent element here. We're going to I'm going to take us through 3 different types of students, and we will actually pretend to be a committee. And although we won't necessarily vote on our own, I'll sort of pretend, I'll take us through of what type of students are stronger or least. All right. So here's an example of the red shapes are still on. I don't know how to take the red shapes off of here. I did not draw them on there. I think somebody else did. Yeah, I don't know how those got on there. I'm sorry. In any case, all right, so we're going to pretend to be a little committee here for a second. So here's 3 different types of students. All 3 students are applying to the same business program, okay? So they've taken the GMAT. The GMAT is, if you're not familiar, it's roughly out of 800, but a 770 score is excellent. All of these scores are good. Even a 650 score is a pretty great score. They all have pretty good GPAs, a 3.5, a 3.9, a 3.3. But they all do a little bit different things out of school as well. So let's just take these one by one, and then I'll sort of talk you through. So student 1, really strong GMAT, GPA. They volunteered in nursing home outside of school, and here's what they wrote in their personal statement. I want to study business to make the world a better place for our elders. Great, sounds like a really nice, solid student. Student number 2, 700 GMAT, so a little lower, 3.9 GPA, really great GPA, involved in cancer research at a local university. And they write, I am confident my near perfect grades and award-winning research will be a good match for your top program. All right, that's good as well. Student number 3 has a lower GMAT, 650, a 3.3 GPA, a little bit lower, but has started her own tutoring company and employs 5 of her classmates, and writes, business is about more than just math. It requires a strong vision and ability to lead a team. Okay, so see how all 3 of these students are students that, as an admissions officer, I would want on my campus. But something that we would probably talk about as a committee is we would say, okay, what is our overall pool looking like this year? Chances are we probably have a lot of students that want to study world to make the world a better place, right? A lot of students write that exact same thing, and we don't get a lot of specificity. I don't know what this student is going to do when they get on campus. Yes, they have a great test scores and good GPA, but are they just going to show up and sort of phone things in? Are they going to be a great business person? I'm less sure. Student number 2 does great research, really is going to be strong in the classroom, but in their personal statement is, my near perfect grades, award-winning research. Sounds like they're bragging a little bit, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You want to be confident, but this student might be overselling themselves and might not be exactly who we're looking for. Student number 3 has lower test scores and grades, but has already started their own business and is already doing really strong work. But at the same time, we might say, hey, this student is doing a really good job in business, but we just can't, we have so many more stronger students that have stronger grades and test scores. So we're not sure which one we're going to take. So really, you can come down on either side on all 3 of these students, and any one of them could be admitted. When I do this exercise with other students, we usually tend to vote, where I'll have everyone raise their hand and say, I want this person, I want this one. And every single time we vote on a different person. I'd say it's pretty evenly split, that every one of these students, the group decides to admit a different one of them. So I take you through this exercise so that there's no formula, right? There's no specific rule that says if you plug in these specific numbers, you're going to be successful. There are many other factors that admissions officers are looking for in this area. So here's Simon Cowell giving the thumbs up. There is no wrong answer. Any of these students could get the, yes, we want to have you on our campus, and that's okay. All right, so great. So now we're moving into the third part of our session today, which is what are the common misconceptions about the admissions process? And I have 3 misconceptions that we are going to go through. So misconception number 1, I must avoid stereotypes of international applicants. So this is both true and untrue, right? Often I get from so many students, they're like, is it bad that I play the piano or the violin, or is it bad that I want to study business or medicine? No, that's not bad. That is great. We're proud of you and happy to have you. But what you need to be able to do is explain why. You're often going to be asked, why did you study these things? And if your answer is simply, because I wanted to get into college or because my parents told me so, that's when you can run into a little bit of trouble. So there's a great chance that you've continued to do these things because they give you some sort of joy or sense of accomplishment, or you've learned something besides just, this is something that I think I'm supposed to do. So think about these types of questions. Who are your favorite? If you play a musical instrument, who are your favorite composers? Have you learned anything from studying music that might also help you in university? So whatever you feel like, if there's a stereotype that you feel you encapsulate, all you need to do to solve that is have a good answer why. And that's something that mentors and people can help you with answers to those questions as well. Misconception number 2, there are secret rules to the admissions process. I already talked about this. The answer is no. There are no magic rules. There's no magic bullets. General rules, small, more selective schools will pay greater attention to a person's story. That doesn't mean they're not going to also look at their GPA and test score. If it's a very selective program, they have a chance to only accept students with top test scores. But within that band of test scores, they might also be looking at the story. Larger schools, or sometimes less competitive schools, maybe they'll use a much more mathematical formula that is really more about GPA, test score. Can you do the work? Great, you can come here. But it really, really depends on the program. And this is why you have to do some research to figure out what type of program you're applying to and where you might be a really great fit. Misconception number 3, final one. The highest ranked school is the best. Also, completely not true. Rankings in the United States are relative. They're pretty different from the way they work in China and other places of the world, in that different programs at schools might be really highly ranked or low ranked. Schools like, putting a school like Harvard next to a school like NYU or University of Chicago, they have such different types of student bodies, different types of programs. Some will have much more ability to work one-on-one with professors, and others will have much more, you'll only be working with teaching assistants and doing, research off on the side. So yes, this can be a little scary to do this type of research, but the rankings are a good place to start, but it's not where you should make your end-all decision. You need to figure out where your specific area of study is strongest, and where you might be a good fit for that. And with that, I hope that you are all feeling a little bit better about this admissions process. I am sort of Simon Cowell in this whole thing, who is one of these judges who will say yes or no. And I'm really looking forward to answering some more of your questions going forward. And hopefully I did not talk too fast and came through here, but I know it's a lot of information to fit into a short amount of time. So hopefully this was a good starter course here. Sound good? Hand it back over to you, Greg.
Evan, thank you so much. Round of applause here from Diet HQ and around the world.
Awesome.
Really, really terrific insight. That is awesome. And it's wonderful to see it from your vantage points. I know for myself and many others, we wonder about these things. We've spent so much time and effort hoping to make you happy and to impress you. But as you put it, there's a lot that goes into this behind the scenes. So super, super insightful. We have a panel discussion now where I have a few questions prepared that we're super excited to ask you. The first of which is all about what our current program here in China, how is that evaluated? So if I'm a high school student, do you know where my high school is? Do you know how strong it is? How about if I'm a university student here in China? How then do you evaluate that with that information?
It's a really great question. So the short answer is yes and no. What is I traditionally when there were fewer international students applying to the United States, it used to be pretty similar where admissions officers would just like look at a ranking list and say, oh, they came from this school, that's a good school. We'll probably take them here. As more and more Chinese students and students from all other types of international schools are now applying to the US, now pretty much every college has a specialized admissions officer who really gets to know all the different types of both universities and high schools internationally. So they're going to not only know the ranking, but probably care a little bit less about the ranking and know, what type of student you are in the context of the high school or university that you're at right now. So you will have someone with some sort of expert knowledge evaluating your application.
That's helpful. Quick follow on. So what if I'm not from, the most famous high school in China? What can I do to better kind of differentiate myself to those that are from really great schools?
Another great question. So I'd say two things. One is to be excited and inquisitive, which means if you have a school or hopefully a couple of schools that you're interested in and you think you might be a good fit for, reaching out to those schools and letting them know that you exist, before you even apply is a really good first step. Because oftentimes they will have an admissions officer that's either based internationally or who will be traveling internationally. And there's a good chance that they might be hosting an event that you actually get to meet them one-on-one or create those kind of things. And number two is just do the best in your school as possible. Don't spend so much time looking over your shoulder and saying, what are my friends over here doing? That's just going to cause too much stress. Focus really hard on how you can do the best with the students that are close to you.
Very good advice. When you mentioned reaching out, is that like with an email or through the website? How specifically do you suggest?
So always start on the website. Go to the university's website and see how they have things set up. Sometimes they'll have a simple, hey, email us here. Oftentimes there will be a specific international students section of the website. And you'll be able to either send an email or sign up for a mailing list or do one of those types of things.
Hey, great suggestion. I really like your feedback and advice with do the best you can with kind of where you are with what you have. I think that's timeless advice that applies to everything in life, not only preparing for admission. I'll get specific with this next one from our panel, which is many students are concerned about partially the cost of going overseas. It's really expensive in the US. How do you suggest? So for instance, some students want to go from high school to American university. Others say, no, I need to wait for master's or I need to wait for PhD. How will an applicant's application be seen differently depending on where they've attended for the different phases?
So that's a good question. It's an area that is changing very rapidly right now. The way that funding is working, university is getting expensive for lots of students in the United States now as well. And so what that has meant is that traditionally, a lot of international students have come in paying full price at the undergraduate level. So it is traditionally quite difficult to get funding or scholarships at the undergraduate level if you're applying abroad. It is possible, and there are special scholarships and ways to get that type of funding, but it is more difficult. When it comes to graduate programs, those are usually typically either partially or fully funded by the university that is granting admission to that. So that's for specifically graduate school PhD type program. For master's programs or MBA, law school, traditionally there are almost no scholarship programs for that, even for students from the United States. You're either taking out loans or finding some way to sort of co-pay that with the university. It's really hard to generalize in this area because there are some schools that have a lot of money and can offer scholarships, but most of the schools that you're going to be looking at don't have a lot of that money to give out.
Fascinating. Okay, so one follow on here. So for a Chinese student or international that's begun their journey, how will their application for admission be treated differently if they've studied in the U.S. versus an international institution? Does that shift things, or is it pretty similar?
It will depend perhaps a little bit. Obviously having experience on a high school campus, having experience, the culture of that type of thing is definitely a positive. It's not a must-have. I think where schools tend to get a little, if you have absolutely no international experience or you haven't even been in international school, they're going to want to know a little bit more about, they'll probably want to do a full interview with you and won't just require the TOEFL, but will want to hear you speak more and how do you conversate and those types of things. So I'd say that's sort of where it breaks down, is just having confidence with how well do you communicate in this type of environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I thought you mentioned a really interesting point there, which is, hey, your TOEFL score is one input, but there's actually more than just your TOEFL to determine your competency here. What role would you say does like your English exam scores play in relation to like that personal statement, that CV? Would you say the TOEFL is super important or of smaller importance?
So it's going to depend, but let me give you an example. So at the University of Chicago, when we were reading applications, we were fortunate. We received lots of applications. We were a very competitive school. We had pretty much a cutoff that we told students about is if you have less than a 104, so we can't really look at you because we have lots of students that are above that. Right down the street at a place like DePaul University or Loyola, also are in Chicago, great schools will look at down in the 90s and the 80s, are looking at all different types of students for TOEFL scores, but are going to care more about they will actually do interviews and say, hey, not everyone is a great TOEFL tester. Maybe they can conversate better. We think they will be able to come here and learn fast and sort of hit the ground running. So it's really going to depend on the type of school that you're applying to.
Absolutely. Now, how about, I'll dive into the specific here. So let's say a student is, kind of 105, 106 range, right above that threshold that you mentioned. Would you recommend that kind of person spend several months trying to put another 1 or 2 or 3 points on their total? Or from your vantage as an admissions officer, is it wiser to actually write the best possible personal statement with that time?
I'd say the personal statement probably is going to be a better use of your time. But, again, it's sometimes it really depends on where the point range is. But generally, telling your story and being a strong writer is going to go farther than 1, 2, 3 points on the TOEFL.
Hey, totally fair. And that's something that we've heard actually in a few mastermind talks now. So I'm glad to hear it from you as a real admissions officer too. Slightly pivoting for our last panel question here. Does it actually matter if it's our story, if we write our own personal statement? Or, in China, it's really popular to actually go to a zhongjie, an agency, to write it for you. From your vantage, what's more strategic?
So it's a good question. It's a scary question too. It's one that admissions officers in the United States are aware of and are really cracking down on. If admissions officers now suspect that an essay has not been written by the student, it's a pretty quick put that in the reject pile. Wow. And it's not just us sort of reading this. There's now pretty advanced software that universities use now that we run essays through that pick up commonly used phrases, So if you're going to some place that's going to write or say that it's going to write you an essay, you have no proof that they have not used that essay for many other different types of people. And if it shows up that there's a sentence or two that's been through the system before, boom, you're done. You're out of the system. So I'd say the risks are really high, and the rewards are low. You know, if you're cheating to get in, you probably don't belong there to begin with. But at the same time, having a little help with your essay and learning how to structure it, and that is totally fine as long as it's your thoughts and you know you're doing the work on the front end. That's really important. But to completely phone it in, I would not recommend that at all, because I know many students who have been just flat out rejected because there's now software that finds those kinds of errors.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because not only is it the right thing to do, but it actually might be more effective too, because admissions officers are very, very smart people. And now with the help of computers and software, you're even smarter. You're seeing more of the same trends and you're able to focus on the people doing it the right way. I will say, Evan, you've given some fantastic insight on that question, which we appreciate. I'm getting some applause here on the Zoom channel. Big thanks on that. There's a great question from a gal named Sarah, who's up in Tianjin. Her question is, so being specific means providing details or anecdotes that connect you to the program. Maybe you could give us an example, Evan, of like a really good case of being specific and personal in that personal statement as it relates to the program of the university.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say the best way to do that would be to connect those two things together. So if your anecdote can be about, you know, why you're interested in a specific program, a way that I teach essay writing is I often say, find two things that you're good at that maybe have nothing to do with each other, right? So maybe one of them is engineering and the other one is volleyball, right? Okay, two things that probably don't really have very much to do with each other. But if you can write an essay that says something about the way that you know, work on a team in volleyball, and I've learned how you have a very specific position in volleyball. I am the setter. I do one type of thing. And getting really good at that helps our whole team together is very similar to how a great engineer thinks, is perfecting a specific aspect of a project, of a widget or something that you're working on is somewhat similar to being a great volleyball player and connecting those two things together. And the reason that that tends to be effective is because you're covering, you know, instead of bragging about, I'm a really good volleyball player and I'm a really good engineer, you're talking about both of those things together and you're keeping the admissions officer's attention at the same time. And it's really it's the way that we tell stories to each other when we're sitting down, you know, for coffee and everything. You know, we connect two different things and we put them together. You should be trying to do the same thing in your college essay.
Hey, fascinating. Now, that's a very good one for international students writing this essay. And you want to see probably good structure, good clarity of logic. What is kind of the bar for like English fluency within that essay? Because, you know, for people that are learning English, do you expect flawless English, or is it okay if there's a few little hiccups or personality quirks in that essay too?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really depends on the program that you're looking for, right? If it's if you are a full, you know, math kind of person and you're applying to a math program where, you know, sort of literature and English is not going to be used as much, obviously that's less important. But if it's a law program or something that is a little more English heavy, they're obviously going to weigh more towards that type of thing. What you should never be afraid of is, you know, if there's sort of like personality quirks that you have, that's totally good in the essay. Even a couple little grammar things are fine, but you definitely want you want to have it proofread. You want someone to take a look at it.
Okay. Very good. That's one thing that we're passionate about, is helping students tell their authentic story in an authentic and polished way, so the point really comes across.
Yeah.
We have a question from Betty here, which I think is a really fascinating one. Betty maybe has a 690 on her GMAT exam. she's noticed that few schools actually provide like a basement, like a bottom line. You have to have this GMAT score to apply. Do you think that means that these schools are less strict on the number, or do we have enough information to say?
So it can be a little bit of both. I can tell you from an insider perspective, I have enough information to say that it would be pretty tough to get into the top 10 with a 690. They are, especially as an international student. It just is, it's a really competitive place. The good news is, again, those rankings of top 10 business schools in the US are the next 20 to 30 schools are excellent schools. And you can get into one of those schools for sure with the 690. But again, when like anywhere else, when you get to that cluster to top 10 anywhere, it just becomes really hard to predict. But I know very few even US students that a 690 would get into. So
sure. And Betty, keep going if you're working hard on the next.
Yeah, if you're working hard on it, you can keep working.
Awesome. Another question that we have coming up here is one of our students is just now beginning his application, and so he's diving in. Applications are coming. It's a little open-ended, but I'd love to hear your wisdom. What should he be doing? Where should the focus area be for his application as he goes forward?
So, two things. One, create if you don't already have this with Diet or with someone else, a full range of what are all the deadlines that you need to meet between now and, because there's so many deadlines and they will zoom past you, or you'll be up, late at night the night before and freaking out. So make a list, put it on whatever calendar, I think, WeChat has reminders, like put it on your thing to remind yourself when these types of things are. Number two, more than your essay, more than everything else, you should be researching the schools that you're applying to. That means spending more than 5-10 minutes on their website. It means deep diving into their website, getting to know who are the students there, what do they do for fun, what kind of clubs might you be interested in. That the more you know about the school, that's the number one factor that schools are looking at is do you know something about how are you going to be a good fit when you get here on campus?
Very good. Project managing with the deadlines and ensuring. Good.
Yes.
That makes total sense, and it's one thing that every candidate can do a little bit better, I think. We have a question from Peter. Peter has studied in the States, and he's wondering basically if he's able to get a waiver for like the TOEFL exam, given that he has studied in the States. What can you say about waivers and other kind of special cases?
So this is going to depend on the school. So at University of Chicago, if you had 2 years of US study, we waived the TOEFL for us. That's fairly standard, but it's going to depend on every school that you're applying to.
Gotcha. And so Peter, in your case, maybe checking out within the deep dive on the website, there might be more information. Failing that, I'm sure a friendly admissions officer could help with your question. That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
A secondary question from Ashley is, will connecting with professors in advance help with admission? For instance, showing them the interest and the knowledge in their research. Is that forbidden, or is that approved of, or even helpful?
I'd be very cautious about it. It can be helpful. I'd say more often, though, students hurt themselves by contacting professors too early. Professors always love to talk about their research and to be engaged with students. But oftentimes there is, they are professors and you are still students. And sometimes there is a gap between the amount of time that they have and what you have to offer. So the piece of advice that I always give is in every interaction that you want to have with a university, be sure that you are moving some sort of conversation forward, right? It's not simply, don't put a list of 4 questions, just asking something. What are you giving? What are you bringing to the table? Saying something like, hey, Professor X, I read your research on volleyball engineering, right? I'm also a volleyball engineer. I think you're right about this, but I have more questions about, this certain area. So, it takes more work on your end. You have to really be, if you haven't read almost everything that the professor has done, I wouldn't contact them. You have to do the work on your end. Don't waste their time. But if you have done that work and you're that excited to talk to them, oftentimes they're really excited for those students that do that work.
I think that's a really, really good feedback. And that's one thing that we share with Dyad scholars is do the work and make it fun too. It should be a subject you really are interested in. We say, follow your smile. And that's been one way in which students have followed their smile.
That's great.
And a question I think is a really good one. So we have an MBA applicant. He is curious about leadership experiences within his undergraduate course and how important are those leadership experiences on campus for MBA applications?
Those are vital. So MBA, I've sat by a couple MBA admissions, and leadership undergraduate is really important to them. So yes, it's definitely something that you'll highlight. It'll be on your application. They'll be looking closely at that.
Great question. And great answer. Thank you, Evan. The one related to a previous answer you gave, which I think is really, really fascinating here. Except the official school website, are there other sources of information where we can learn about a university? Where else can we go besides the website?
That's also a good question. So there's a couple sort of like background, sort of like student ranking websites. Things like, what's it called now? I think it's called like Finch or something. I'll have to look it up. Maybe we can send it around afterwards. But there's a couple things where the students on campus actually like rank their own opinions of campus. It could be a little bit hard, there's a lot of social media that's happening on college campuses that are reaching out to students a lot that way. It could be a little bit harder coming across from that side, but if you can access those things, it's always it's a good place to find that information. And yes, a lot of times there will be student groups as a part of the campus, like a welcome group or an admissions committee or a student welcoming committee. Finding who those people are and contacting them, that's a great way.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So there'll be like an international students or a Chinese students association in a lot of these schools, and they're great people to contact.
That's a really clever idea. Before I applied to the University of Chicago, I read a couple editions of the Chicago Maroon.
Oh yeah, that's a great one too. Yeah.
And that's it gives you a different viewpoint, which I kind of enjoyed, where it definitely was not the official university mouthpiece. It was saying things even critical of the university, but that actually helped me make a more informed decision.
Yeah.
Our next question here is on for the CV. Some folks are thinking about their education experience, their professional experience. Others are wondering about kind of social experience, volunteer experience, leadership experience. What do you think are best practices in actually structuring that CV for those of us that may not have a ton of experience yet or may feel like we have too much experience for one-page CV?
Great question. This is probably one of the hardest to talk about because it is so abstract. I think this is a great chance for, if you have a mentor or someone to work with that can sort of give you advice on, hey, just move this around, move this in these areas. Because there's really, there's plenty of templates online that you can sort of look and say, hey, I can structure it like this, but it's really hard for me without seeing what your resume looks like to give you great advice there. The biggest thing is, formatting and things like that are not going to affect you too much, right? A lot of times what happens is these resumes are sort of like scraped for information and they end up in a much different format than even if you try to make it look pretty, we don't see it in a pretty form. We just see it in like a big text box. So
that's helpful right there. So maybe even prioritizing content instead of fancy.
Yeah.
Really, really fascinating. I think we've got time for just another couple of quick questions here. On recommendation letters. Okay, so this is another one of these big issues. I'd love your feedback. Will letters from Chinese professors versus American professors be treated differently? Like, for instance, during an exchange program in the US versus a professor who knows us, or should a student just write their own letter there in China?
This is, again, so this is something that I think has been changing over the past couple of years. It used to be, if there was, a Chinese, even a translated Chinese professor's letter or something like that, people would be like, oh, what does that mean? That doesn't mean very much. Now, I think, again, with these admissions officers that are much more experts in that area, are looking much more closely and take those into account much more, because these are professors that know you better. So I would say if you can get one of both, it's great. Not completely required, but obviously, whenever you can show different facets and sides of you, it's going to be a stronger application.
Great. I think that's excellent advice. And the more substantive you can actually make the letter too. That's one thing that I've heard, and in my own experience is borne out, where if someone actually really gets to know you, that can be more important than just someone with a fancy title.
Yep.
It's better really can speak to your strengths and your characteristics and attributes as you go. And I think that's really good to do the split strategy too. That's clever. Excellent. So how about for students that have studied in like the US, for instance, how critical are professional details around the major? So like basically, is it okay to switch your major as you apply for a master's program? How might that be treated in your experience?
Generally it's okay, fine, and fairly common to change your major or shift. But again, like we said earlier, you need to answer why, right? And if your why is simply, hey, I tried this thing out and I want to try something new, that's okay. But they're going to want to know, how prepared are you to make that transfer?
Cool. So you gotta show that you're ready to make the jump.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And I think what you previously joked about, the volleyball engineering example, actually fits here too, which is, how do your previous experiences actually leapfrog you? How is that extra insight or a new perspective going to be useful and beneficial? And I'll think of your volleyball engineering example when I come to mind.
Okay.
Edward here has had has a 2.9 GPA, and he's looking for what kind of TOEFL or GRE range should he target to, quote, make it sound less terrible?
Again, like I said earlier, it completely depends on the type of program you're looking towards. I'd work backwards from there. I'd sort of, take a test or two and see where you fit on the TOEFL and where you're at right now. And if you're sort of in that same range, there's plenty of schools that are going to be interested in having you. They're probably not top 10, 20 schools, but there's great schools. And I think, again, that's what I said earlier, is keeping a wide range of different schools open and being able to come here and do the work. That's much more important than aiming just for a prestigious place, because you might be in over your head too.
Hey, totally fair point. And Edward, best wishes on your upcoming exams too. Our last question during the Q&A here comes from Andy. Her question, or his question, is, if my working experience is less than 2 years, can I still apply for a top MBA in the US?
So yes, generally 2 years is the minimum that schools will ask for. But MBAs are happening younger and younger. So like 2 to 5 years working experience is pretty common. So yes, you could still apply. I would, use whatever time you have, really, take a full year to study for your GMAT, get a really strong score there. And maybe 3 years might be a good fit, but you can still apply with 2.
Okay, great. Javon has another question on recommendation letters, which is, how important is it to have someone very, very famous versus someone that knows us well? Any feedback on that?
Again, we tend to prefer someone that knows you very well. But again, like I said with the thing earlier, if you can get one of each, it never hurts. Yeah.
Keep building those relationships, Javon.
Yeah.
Best wishes. Miley, for the personal statement, do you recommend stories that tell who I am, or experiences that highlight my academic performance?
Again, it's things that can do both are great. But generally those places are more for tell who you are, right? We hear about your academic experience in a lot of other places. in the application.
Yeah. And so Miley, I think your transcript, even your CV to some extent will speak more to those academic credentials. Telling who you are, your story. I love what Evan mentioned earlier about the why, because that doesn't come across in your transcript, whereas the PS is the chance for it to shine. Yeah, absolutely, Miley. We're happy to help there. Evan, this has been just in English, we call it a tour de force. I think you've given a ton of fantastic just insight. Boom, boom, boom here. That is awesome. We're gonna test you with one final question. That's from Christine. The SOP, the statement of purpose, and PS, personal statement, should they have a different focus?
Yes, they should have a different focus. So your SOP should be more academic, very academically minded, right? And your personal statement is a lot more who you are.
Hey, excellent.
Yeah.
Well said. Sarah, with the final question. This lady's a DIAD chairman scholar. She's fantastic. So I know this is a good question. She majors in psychology. She wants to pursue a PhD. She found a few labs where the professor's focus of research actually doesn't quite fit her interest, but it's still in the same area. If it makes sense for her to contact, how might she do that in the best way? Any other advice, given that there's partial fit but not full overlap?
I'd say, go. If you can't find anywhere with your exact area of focus, you're going to have to do the best you can. And especially if these psychology programs are at universities where lots of research is going on, they might be excited to have someone come on board that is doing something a little bit different, and they might be willing to take you under their wing, but that's something you're going to have to ask of that specific program.
Hey, very good feedback. Sarah, best wishes with that. We can actually strategize how specifically you can do that. So Ashley just asked another smart question, which is about shifting her major to psychology. I'll jump in there and say courses on Coursera actually can be super useful. How does an admissions officer, though, Evan, look at Coursera or edX or other online materials?
So we will look at them, but definitely it's not something that an admissions officer will put even in the same rigor as classes that you're actually taking at a university level. They're just not to that point yet. Maybe in another 4 to 5 years, but there's still a lot of uncertainties and unknowns in that area. But it's for a student that, like in between, like that student earlier that wanted to, shift their focus and change their major and maybe didn't have time to take other courses, and they took this from Coursera. That's excellent. That's something they would be like, okay, great.
Good feedback. So those of us that are struggling with our GPA, stay focused on our core classes. Those of us trying to switch major, maybe it actually makes sense to build out a Coursera profile.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, hey, this has been totally terrific. We are grateful for the insight here, and we're going to give you a nice round of applause at Diet HQ and around the world. This was fantastic. Our mission at Diet is to inform and inspire. We've actually had the chance to work with Evan now for a few years. Evan is our senior advisor. Has helped us build some awesome teaching materials, helped us really understand the admissions office, what really happens there. And we're grateful for it. You're making your time. It's after midnight in Los Angeles. You're up to inspire the next generation. We are super, super inspired by you and the example you're setting here. Absolutely grateful for that. Upcoming from Diet, we're always trying to do a better job at our webinars and our events. We're going to give you an opportunity to win a free Diet Redefined DIY package. We've just launched an amazing new essay editing and then school strategy package. We'd love to actually give one of those away. We're going to be following up with a survey where you can weigh in on today's event, give us advice, give us feedback, and be the first ever user of this brand new launch package, just for you being here with these great insights with Mr. Evan Cudworth. We're going to follow up with more information about some awesome programs we're launching around Yellowstone National Park, some of the research that you can be doing to really stand out in that application process. It's going to be amazing. We'll follow up with more info there. And our next event is going to be featuring Diet's very own Director of Curriculum, Daniel Burnham, for a Monday 7 p.m. session. Evan and Daniel actually travel around China. These guys are pals. Evan, thank you for being here. We're grateful for it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you everyone for tuning in here. We are grateful for it. If you have any extra questions, reach out to us here at Dyad. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to be following up with a little bit more information about what I just mentioned on Yellowstone, the Redefined DIY, and our survey there. Next event, 7 p.m. Monday. It's going to be fantastic. We look forward to catching you soon. Jayo. Jayo.